Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, my entitled cousin tries to steal my dad's house after my mom died. She then facilitates a huge scam to screw us over, but it all turns out differently than she expected. Here is what happened. Subscribe to Ripe on YouTube and hit the bell to turn on notifications. The first one starts like this. This might be a tad long, so let's get right into it by introducing everybody relevant to this story. Karen in this case is my mother's first cousin. The grieving widower is unfortunately my father and I am me. A couple of years ago, my mother had passed away after a long stint of cancer and her body just couldn't do it anymore. I had moved out years before that, but wanted to make sure that I did everything I could to help my father during this time. He was a broken man when she died, and honestly, even to this day he was never the same again. I had decided to stay with him for a little while because he did not want to be alone in the house he shared with my mother. We were both devastated and being together helped to a degree. I brought what I needed to stay for a while and made sure to give my roommates my share of the rent for when I was gone. During that time, family of course visited us, giving kind words and bringing us food. They knew that my dad was not really in the mood for company, so the visits were very short for the most part, that was except for one person, namely Karen. She would come every few days and stay way longer than anybody was comfortable with. She would even just wander around the house and look around with neither of us really having the energy to tell her not to. She barely even said anything and never brought anything for my father. My mother did not have a large family, and during the time she was sick, Karen was the only one that had never visited her either at home or in the hospital. She also had a very convenient emergency the day of the funeral that changes depending on who asks her and when. It was clearly just an excuse, so I didn't know why she was so interested now that we were just trying to have some peace and alone time in our home. Finally, one day she turned to my dad and opened her mouth. "Karen, so what are you gonna do with the house now?" "Dad, what do you mean?" "Karen, well, I mean you're all alone now and this is a pretty big house and great to raise a family. Plus, you are getting on in the years and you probably shouldn't be living in a house by yourself." "Dad, I can take care of myself fine. I have spent 30 years in this house with my wife. I have no intentions to give it up." Karen got an annoyed look on her face before starting to talk again. "Karen, I just meant that you might be more comfortable in a place with other older single people." She was hinting at some kind of assisted living place, even though my dad was perfectly capable and honestly was not that old. Before I could open my mouth to tell her off, she started talking yet again. "Karen, it would be nice to keep it in the family though, and you know the place I am living with the kids is so small now. They would love the big yard to run around in and the nice fireplace you have." "Dad, get out." My dad is the kind of guy that when he yells, the entire room goes deadly silent. So Karen listened and left. I stopped seeing her coming by, so I thought she got the idea, and now that there was no house for her to inherit, she was just gonna go back to her own life. I was extremely wrong. A few days later, we were visited by people from the town who got reports of strange smells and that my dad's house was being reported for being uncared for. It was a little messy, but like normal messy. There was no health hazard like they were told about. They walked through the whole house and their presence really upset my father. The men seemed very confused when they couldn't find anything, but I had some sneaky suspicions about what this was about. I asked them what would have happened if it turned out that the property was unkept and considered a safety hazard. They told me the house would have been basically taken away from my father and condemned until cleaned and sold to somebody else. Since he was old, the argument could be made that he couldn't care for the property and it was gonna be too much of a problem for the neighborhood. This reeked of Karen, and a couple days later I noticed her driving by and trying to see if me and my dad were still living in the house. I had no idea how she thought her plan was gonna work, that they would just believe her on her word and literally take my dad's home away from him. He rented from the town, so if they did not like the state the place was in, they could have easily taken things away. I was angrier at Karen for upsetting my dad with all of this than trying to actually steal a house from a widower. Worse actually, because she was willing to let him get kicked out of his own home and not have anywhere to go in order to get her hands on this house. It really does make you wonder how low a person can go when it involves their own family and a death. Either way, I wanted to get revenge on her for all the crap that she did to my father. He might have not been in a state to do anything, but I was going to. It was not a secret in the family that Karen did some shady crap when it came to her finances. It was all connected to her 3 children too. None of them had the same father, and she was not married or dating any of them. That is not something I want to insult, because I know that for some people it happens that way. The thing is that she gets government assistance because she claims that she has no contact with the fathers and cannot get any kind of address or name to get child support. I have no idea how she got away with that, but she did. The thing is that this is a total lie, and each of her kids knows and has a relationship with their father. He pays for things for them, and she collects government aid for the kids and spends it herself instead of working for any money. I decided that the Department of Welfare should be aware of what she is doing. I even had pictures of some of these kids with their dads and told them everything that I knew. She was hit hard for all of this once they put the pieces together and were even threatening to arrest her and take away her kids. Instead though, the judge took pity on her because of the kids and told her that she was going to have to get a job to pay back every penny that she had basically stolen from the government. This caused her to have to move from here, okay house, to a much worse one since she didn't have all that income anymore. I think one of those kids even went to go live with his dad because she just couldn't afford all of the kids full time. Which I was happy about because she seemed to really only see her kids as money for herself. I never told dad what I did, and eventually things got back to normal and I moved back with my roommates, leaving dad with his home. And yeah, Ripe Stars, time and time again, it is really sad to see how family relationships can break because of money. Some people say that money is where many friendships end, but it does not only seem to affect friendships, but even families. Either way, the next one is titled Revenge on the Worst Boss from Hell. And by the way, Ripe Stars, this will be an XXL mega story, so please don't forget to watch until the end to see the ending. So, I worked for this small business IT consulting firm for 7 years, owned and operated by a person we will call Douchebag. And by the way, Ripe Stars, the monsoon rain just started, so please excuse the rain noises. Anyway, the first 2 years things were fine. Occasionally, this guy would take things a little too far. He was just passionate about his opinion and always had to be right, so I would always give him that. I don't have to agree, but I saw his need and left it at that. What I started to discover, however, is the turnover for the company is a couple of years, and I began to realize why. The boss, Douchebag, picks one worker and makes it his life's work to make that person as miserable as possible. I'm guessing the reason? Ego purposes. For months I would hear him shouting all the time at this one guy. The co-worker, after leaving the meeting, would go back to his office from where I had a view, and I could just see the stress and misery in his face. Till finally I said to him, "What the hell, man? He's always giving you a hard time here lately. What did you do?" He did not seem to know. He confided in me right there the level of hell he is in and some of the things Douche has said or done. Honestly, I could not believe some of the details he shared on what Douche both said and did. I felt things were embellished because people just don't do some of the things he said. I would realize much later he was telling the truth, as crazy as it sounded. A few months later he finally found another job and left. I talked to him a couple times a year and he always said it was the best choice in his life he ever made. Douche's sights then narrowed onto me, and I can take a lot. So for the next 5 years I took it. He would insult me pretty much every day, each day more and more colorful. I didn't really care or take it home with me, so it was not a problem for me. For Douche, I would learn it was. Unrelated, 5 years in, I put in my notice because he asked me to get a couple certifications, and if I did, he would take care of me. Once I did what was requested, he backed out of the agreement and played coy. Once he received my notice a couple months later, he called me up within a minute, begged me to stay. It's important to note he only asked for 2 certifications. I not only obtained those, but an additional 14 on top of that. Each time he would tell me, "Great job, you will be well taken care of." And he lied 16 times in total on this matter. He matched the offer and increased my salary up another 15k. Not looking forward to starting a new job, I decided to stay. What I learned is, I was a fool to do that and money is not everything. Go where you will be the most happy, best at life advice I can give after this experience. He left me alone for a couple of months after that. He was not in the office much either. Then a day struck his fancy to start things up again, only that he ran out of material. My work itself is solid and he had no opportunity to criticize that. The only method he had was bashing his ego and sarcasm around, but he realized it had no impact on me. There is a brief snippet of any given day of what it's like to be selected as his target. He would communicate a problem he was having in length. Let's say he complained about his cell phone. After he finished his story, you would provide a helpful suggestion or advice from your experience. In turn, he would ask with an entitled and sarcastic tone if you were an expert on the matter and wanted to see those credentials. I learn fast and just never speak unless spoken to. Any comment or insult he made, I would respond without emotion and just say okay. Because douche was not able to get a rise out of me the old-fashioned way, he decided to create fictional content for a new direction. Our small company would go out to eat as a whole or just order in on Fridays. I ate half my sandwich and wrapped the remaining to take home. He saw me with leftover food and claimed that I was taking home dinner on his dime. Anytime there was any leftover, even a single French fry, he would be there with a magnifying glass for inspection to find any conceivable way to yell. So on Fridays I started packing my lunch. I would order a beverage and a side, I would finish the beverage and the side. Then I would eat what I brought, and if I didn't finish it, he had no opportunity. You could see his look of disappointment when he would scan my plate. This went on a couple of weeks, but he had no opportunity and could not complain. He realized he failed again. So then he came up with the next item, the bathroom. This I actually did a little research on and could not find anything legally I could do, but anytime anyone would use the restroom, he would blame me for the smell. Instead of hello when passing in the hallway, he would say, "Did you use spray or did you light a match?" As hateful as he could, but that was his normal. It went much deeper than this, more than I care to share. But I honestly believe douche has a fetish on this topic, which is why I looked into it legally. It was just always on his mind and a little too important for him. Let's just leave the rest unsaid. I must have visually tipped him off. I didn't approve of this because he never got bored with it. However, I did at least get him to stop asking about if I used the spray. Anytime I used the bathroom, even to take a piss, I would use the entire can of air refreshener. This was not an easy task, as I would have to mask my face to empty that entire thing. It takes a while, surprisingly, to empty an entire can in a session. One thing is for certain, when I was finished, someone used the spray and douche was buying a new can. It took about 5 weeks, but I think he figured it out. Spending so much on spray, he stuck to just asking about matches after that. He even provided them in the bathroom. One day, we were out with a client. The current topic at this moment was, "What is your favorite meal?" My answer was, "Hot wings, I could eat those every day." Douchebag jumps in, his comment, "Just think how bad the bathroom would smell." Most at the table wouldn't get the context and direction of that comment, but I knew. He did this in front of a client in public while people are eating. I almost walked out. Then I remembered he drove and it's a long way back. Plus, douche is over 60, what kind of person knocks out a senior? I had to chant that in my mind to keep control. I never get pissed, but after years this was the last straw. I seriously pleaded with myself all day not to do it because I would go to jail and he would win. During this time period he also started playing with my money. Behind 4 to 5 months with reimbursement, week late on paychecks, stuff like that. You ask where it's out, he says, "Next week." You explain he already said that last week and then he would play coy. I finished out the day without reacting somehow, took everything I had, but I'm not gonna allow this to be unanswered. That was dangerous and too close. If he wants trouble, I will give it to him. I will get even in a lawful way somehow. Then the idea came to me that night. I did my research and odds were in my favor that it could work. I am just gonna mirror him until he fires me. When he fires me, he will have to pay half my current salary of 65k until I get a new job. You know what? I can live perfectly fine on 32.5k. Why not make him pay out of his pocket 32.5k for everything he had said and done? He would have to pay this over the course of 6 months or until I found a new job. So my goal was to make him pay me $32,500 to be exact over 6 months as restitution for what he said at that table. I read up on all the rules in my state for unemployment. So each state is different, but basically to qualify for it, it cannot be your fault if you were fired. So if I stood there and told him where to put it, that's a no-go. However, if I was laid off, I would qualify. So I hit him where it hurts. His favorite thing in the world is meetings because he loves to hear himself talk and take you step by step through his thought process with a noble tone, congratulating himself for his thinking and why his way is the best way. So then I started speaking up and illustrated a more efficient way that cost less. He would argue, sometimes red in the face, mad. Especially if others in the meeting liked my idea. He knew he was wrong, but he would dismiss them and demand it be done his way. I then started talking about him within earshot on purpose. I would say things like, make sure you perform that douche's way. Takes longer, but it's better than him releasing the Kraken. Or the Kraken? I'm not sure. It would make everyone laugh, but it was not a direct insult. Trust me when I say this guy has a massive ego, and I was counting on this for pissing him off. I laid it on thick. In time it took its toll. I knew it did because what came next. His retaliation was the kitchen sink. He had nothing, so he started accusing me of things and then playing coy when it came to reviewing the details of facts. He would put words in my mouth, I would state he was wrong and then he would tell me I was. All he was doing was opening the door so he could play a revengeful sarcasm game. I know it's a game, so I decided to take his new toy away from him by just going along with whatever it is he said. Which further made him mad because what he was doing had no effect on me. Fast forward 6 months, I am still working here. But we are only receiving a couple calls a day, which are 15 minutes each. This was due to douche's bad business discussions. While I took delight knowing he was hemorrhaging money for months, I was hoping for a layoff to execute my plan. But there was nothing. I have to make him want to fire me, it's the only way. I have to beat him at his own game while providing the illusion he is in control. So I turned up the heat. I was asked to travel to a client by the second in command. I said, I'm sorry man, I have not received reimbursement in 6 months for travel expenses and I just had my work cell phone service turned off. With the way business is right now, things are not looking good. I would be stupid to take on more expenses and I'm owed over $2,000 as it is. Once that is paid in full, I'd be more than happy to continue on a week-to-week basis after reimbursements. That day, Douche had a meeting with me and set up a payment plan to pay the money back. After 3 weeks it would be paid, so I said to Douche, understood, after 3 weeks I'll be on the road again, cool. Just making sure he understood because he wanted to play games and not pay the amount in full. Douche is now going to pay me salary for 3 weeks to do nothing until the reimbursement fee is paid. The guy has a several million-dollar house, goes on vacations, has boats, etc. Out of all the things I've done so far, this had made the most significant impact. Because I outwit him at his own game, it embarrassed him in the eyes of others. Why? Because the second in command was instructed to drive me anywhere I was needed. So I had my own personal taxi driver for the few calls we had over the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks he paid 2 people, me and the admin, to drive and watch me work. I was friends with the admin and he knew exactly what I was doing and he loved every second of it. Then on the 3rd week, 3 days until the final payment, it happens. Douche enters my office and gives me the filmier demeaning dog wave gesture to follow him without speaking. We sit down and he asks me what the problem is. I told him the problem is he needs a new hobby. You got someone sitting here that busted his ass for the last 7 years, in the other you need to bash someone's face in the dirt with your ego. The problem with me is I won't conform and provide both. He asked me for some examples. I said, you know what I'm talking about, and even if I did review them, you would play coy. He then played coy about being coy. I laughed. After a pause, he said, if you feel that way, why didn't you speak to me about it? I reminded him that I did that twice and both times he humiliated me for it and said, "This is IT." What the IT career that I've done the last 20 years had to do with his ego, I'll never know. He responded with, "I'm behind the times, my work has been poor, and out of the kindness of his heart he gives me a raise, and after I demanded it." I responded with, "Okay." Then he finally said what I wanted to hear: "I wanna call it quits." I remained professional and communicated I'm sorry things didn't work out, and spent the next 2 hours reviewing stuff with coworkers on how to handle certain things. I shook his hand with a smile and left without saying anything negative. The fruit of my labor will do the talking for me shortly. En route on the way home, I called family members to tell them the good news. Everyone was so happy for me. It finally happened. When I arrived home, I promptly adjusted the dates on the unemployment forms I had filled out already in Wait and submitted them. I called the state and confirmed everything was documented on my end accurately, and now it's the waiting game. My plan was not realized until my boss received the letter in the mail about a week later stating that he's gonna have to shell out my salary for the next 6 months or until I found a job. Panicked at this point, he realized what I set him up for, so he claimed he fired me for poor work performance. The state said, "Okay, prove it. In this state, it's the employer's burden to prove it." My record had no blemishes, and he couldn't use a client because a number of people at any given client would vouch for me and the truth, as they all liked me and appreciated my work. Realizing the shitstorm he is in now, I am told from the admin friend he was on the phone with them quite a while, twisting and turning the fake stories out. The bottom line is, the state needed to see documented verbal and written warnings signed so he couldn't fake them. He called his lawyer and his lawyer told him he is screwed. Later, my boss told coworkers he felt bad for me that I couldn't find work, and he decided to give unemployment to me to save face of his ego. That made official that his ego was affected. He didn't want anyone to know the truth. At this point, he realized I got the better of him when I fought back, and I won big. In a last-ditch effort, he lied about how much I made. The state sent me paperwork stating this fact and asked me to prove my salary. So I gave them copies of checks and pay stubs for the last 6 months. After that, things went easy. He was flagged for lying, which made the reaming steps effortless, the state rep told me. For the reason I was terminated, I said, "Douche, the owner made some poor business discussions that impacted the company losing business and clients." He let me go as a business discussion. In his shoes, I would have done the same and understand. I wrote it that way for a reason. But Douche did not realize why. I knew what his reaction would be. The state saw a down-to-earth guy that was honest and understanding on paper, and then they saw Douche's predicted response of being a douche, most likely yelling, and of course lying. I had no doubt that would seal the deal simply based on the evaluation on character before the facts even entered into it. His reaction being, his ego had to take it up the ass. Once for failing as a businessman, another for me saying so on state paperwork, and lastly, accepting that I got the better of him, and all this time I've been coaxing him to make this move. The only thing left to do is pay me every single week. And his money goes to the state first, and then the state sends it to me, so he cannot play games with my money or the state is coming after him. Over the next 6 months, I took that time to enjoy myself, pursue hobbies, and lived life to the fullest on his dime as a reward for his comment. Once the letter came to renew unemployment, Douche would no longer have to pay, or only a parentage, I forget. The important thing to know is taxpayers would have to pay after 6 months, not Douche. So I declined the renewal. 3 weeks later, I had a new job. It was either that or knock him out during that lunch. It was not easy, took work, but I'm proud of the way I handled it. I feel vindicated. It's pretty rare the world is balanced, evil often wins, but not this time. This time it cost Douche $32,500 to be exact. All in all, I can say 10 out of 10 would do it again. Due to his age, I cannot imagine that it would be a humbling experience at this point, but it was for me. Money is not everything. There's only one thing of true value, which is your happiness. A year later, I am very happy now. I enjoy my new job and my new boss. I discovered myself again, who I really am. The goofy, friendly guy, my light is no longer dimmed by a dark presence, and I can be myself without punishment. And yeah, ripe stars, I would say that was probably the best malicious compliance / petty revenge I have ever seen on Reddit. I gotta say, thankfully, I've never had an awful boss like this where this would have been necessary, but I'm sure some of you have dealt with similar awful bosses, and I'm curious if you have ever gotten revenge or any sort of malicious compliance on them. Feel free to write down your story either in the comments or on r/ripe stories on Reddit, where there is a good chance that I will read it in a video, simply because on Reddit the text is more structured compared to the YouTube comments. But either way, thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you again tomorrow.